Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Vegan Proteins, Muscles by Brussels Radio. My name is 𝐶𝐿.
And I'm Danny.
And this is our 98th episode. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed our last episode. We're back at it again and hell-bent on reaching episode 100 before the end of the year. So expect a string of podcasts back to back to back to back before the new year.
And we actually do have plans in the new year. We actually mapped out more or less every podcast topic for 2023. We'll see how long that goes before we actually tweak them and start changing some of the topics. But we have it all planned out, which is more than we've ever had going into any year before.
It was a lot of fun. I feel like we need at least 2 or 3 more planning sessions. But yeah, I think the bones of what we're going to be putting out there for next year are laid out. And I am pretty excited for the stuff that we'll be talking about and creating more content together as a team as we're growing, right? Not only do we have someone who's out there helping us edit the podcast. Thank you. Shameless plug to our editor, Christina.
Thanks for the plug, 𝐶𝐿.
We also have Athena, who's working with us now. So our coaching team is growing, and you'll probably see more and more content with all 3 of us together into the new year. So be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, very excited about that. In other news, getting ready for the holidays, trying to cram as much holiday fun into everybody's waking minutes from now until the end of the year. So that's been sweet. Yesterday had my first ever parent-teacher conference with Daisy's kindergarten teacher. Got to meet her in person and see Daisy's little classroom in her little chair, and it was so cute. And realized that their classroom faces the playground. Like the window, they're on the first floor, and the windows are just like the playground is 2 feet on the other side. I'm like, oh, that is brutal for little people without a lot of impulse control to have to sit there and look at that all day. But that went well. But they also got out early for parent-teacher conferences. So last night we made gingerbread cookies. And after dinner, I was like, okay, everybody can have 1 cookie, and passed around the tray, which they did a wonderful job decorating these vegan gingerbread cookies. The royal icing came out perfect. 𝐶𝐿 takes his cookie, and then as I'm taking the tray away, 𝐶𝐿 tries to grab a second cookie, and I have to be like, 𝐶𝐿, no, everybody gets 1. Because if 𝐶𝐿 has 2, then the kids are going to want 2, blah, blah, blah. Basically, he's a big kid.
I'm also a growing boy right now because I have a lot of weight that I still need to put on, believe it or not, even though I've put on a fair amount of weight. And honestly, I'm just not in the mood to step on the scale. It's not scale fear. It's like a lack of desire of needing to control all the variables and do all the things. And I'm reprioritizing. Like I told my coach, maybe this makes me a bad athlete and a good person. But to me, what recovery means is not focus on. Maybe this makes me a bad athlete and a good person. But to me, recovery is not focusing on going back to the drawing board and reflecting, and also focusing on what I can do to have improvement season, nutrition habits, and training protocol that's good. But for me, it's about getting back to the priorities that I had to let go of to compete. My family, my relationships, my job, my environment, all the things, and also, well, yeah, I could go on and on, but to me, it's
I don't know what this has to do with you eating 2 holiday cookies.
I'm trying to not take responsibility here for eating all of the cookies.
I also bought, so one of the things is the kids are vegan, and they're the only vegan kids in their school, and the school doesn't really understand what vegan means. So we have had more non-vegan food incidents than I can even count with these 2 kids. It's frustrating that, teachers can't just check a label or something for milk, not for weird, obscure vegan, non-vegan ingredients, but does this have straight up dairy and eggs in it? Can we not? Anyway, so I try to find some fun snacks to send them to school with, so they're not tempted by the cookies they hand out in the classroom, because they have fun cookies in their lunchbox. So I bought these 2 boxes of Partake is the brand, holiday flavored cookies. There was a holiday sprinkle and chocolate peppermint cookies. I come downstairs last night, and who's eating the kids' cookies? Who?
Santa.
Yes, Santa.
Santa came early. It wasn't me.
Anyway, very funny stuff. So, what are we talking about today?
Today's topic is, are women small men?
Elaborate, please.
Well, I could totally deviate from like where we should be as far as staying in our lane goes, because this is a broad topic. But obviously, as it relates to us, it's the question that we need to ask ourselves here are do we train men and women differently?
Right. So he went straight from my notes, are women small men? What we mean is, is it a good idea to train women just as if they were small men? Do you write their training programs the exact same for a woman as you would for a man? And I think it's a really interesting question. And I just wanted to talk about it more on the podcast because I think probably a lot of people have questions about this. And yeah, just thought we could dig into it. Very obviously, women are different than men. Biological women are different than biological men. Therefore, a lot of people think that men and women should be trained very differently. And I think that just like culturally, we can see this. If you just take a big step back and look at the fitness industry as a whole, what do you picture when you think of men training and women training? Like, stop and think about it for a second.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind are dudes benching and like how much you bench, bro. Mm-hmm. And for women, well, this is more of a
It's a stereotype, but it's not.
Well, it also depends, right? If this was 20 years ago, it wouldn't be all about the booty. These years, it is. It's booty building, glutes, essentially.
But even still, yes. So we'll get there. Every woman is focused on the glutes, but they're still lifting much lighter weights. Like in general, you're not seeing women load their barbell up and really push through. We're seeing a lot of banded work with no weights or even body weight work or, HIIT style workouts where it's like they do one exercise and then they jump around for 30 seconds and then they drop into their next exercise and there's like no rest, lightweight, different body parts. Yeah. But just the intensity with which we think about men and women working out, I think is different. When I picture it, and maybe I'm biased because I work in the industry, I picture dudes, loading up their bar, half repping 3 reps, putting it back, and then sitting there for 5 minutes talking to their bros. Women, different thing. They're hustling. They're working really, really hard. Like they're expending a lot of energy, but there's not a lot of intensity to the resistance training that they're doing. They're not moving much weight, is what I'm saying, but they sure are moving a lot. Does that make sense?
I get where you're going with this, and I mostly agree. I don't know that that's our entire audience, but there's definitely culturally, that's what you see.
Right.
One would dare to say more often than not that it's also perpetuated, like having the women's section of the gym, which don't get me started, but I can also sort of understand, I suppose, but like not if I'm being
different conversation
anyways,
for sure. But yeah, women's sections, you do see some of that in women's sections or classes that are geared towards women, right? Strength training classes. You don't walk into a strength training class where they hand out 5 and 8 pound dumbbells and see it full of men. Mm-hmm. Okay? You just don't see that very much. So, again, you're totally right. This is probably not our audience specifically, but culturally, I think it still holds true largely that women and men think they need to train differently.
Okay, so let's just pretend that this is something that obviously now that we're aware of and we're like, I don't really need to listen to this. It's still obviously something that's going to affect you on a psychological level, but also what could we gather from this information in terms of how women train differently than men and why? I think that's the big question and the topic that we need to open up here.
That's a good point. And I actually didn't think about talking about that in this particular podcast, but I think that there is a reason why women shy away from that style of training. So first, I'm going to back up and say that my viewpoint is that for the most part, women and men should train the same. For the most part. There's some nuances here. We'll get into them later, but largely, yeah, women that want to, have some muscle on their body, achieve a kind of lean look, they should be doing heavy compound movements and, strength training hard in a quote unquote normal rep range. And what I mean by that is like anything from like 5 reps to maybe maybe 20 reps on a couple of exercises, but like largely in that 8 to 12 rep range. That's where they should be hanging out the majority of the time. And those reps should be hard. Hard. Not hard because you're doing cardio in between the sets. Hard because the muscle can't do more than that. And that is how, a lot of men train. Most men that I talk to, work with, no, they're not lifting higher than the 15 rep range, right?
Right.
But it is super common to see women doing 30, 40, 50 reps of something with virtually no weight. And it's impressive in its own right because it's muscular endurance, but it's not going to get them the physique that they probably want.
So where do we go from here in terms of endurance and volume and reps when it comes to women versus men, right? There is a sweet spot, and let's get real here. We are physique and strength focused. That number is the same across the board. Doesn't matter if you're a woman biologically or if you're a man biologically, like the principles are the same. You want to create a hypertrophic response, and that means more volume. Within reason, though. You don't want your volume to be so high that the intensity isn't there and you're just cranking out, I don't want to call it junk volume, but you're just not getting the kind of stimulus
No, it's junk
you
volume.
want.
That's exactly what junk volume is.
Okay, fair
It's
enough.
doing an exercise that it just doesn't have enough stimulus to affect the muscle the way you want it to be affected. But you brought up a really great question, like, why do women train that way? Like, why are they gravitating towards that? And I think a lot of it is some myths that we have believed for a really, really long time. And I think a lot of those myths have improved, but they do still exist. For example, the number one myth, the absolute number one myth about weightlifting in women is that if they lift heavy, they will get bulky. That is, again, it's improved a lot, but it is still there and I still hear it.
Well, and there were all kinds of trigger words, and I feel like in our earlier years of coaching, we shied away from them because we didn't want to ruffle feathers and we didn't want to offend people. But these days, I like breaking down trigger words and making them not as scary. In other words, when I first started coaching, I had to tread lightly around using a word that wasn't toned when it came to training my female clients, which, let's get real here, vegan audience, I'd love to see a little more balance, but, we mostly train women. That's just the way it works. Anyways, long story short, I don't want to use the word tone ad nauseum. I don't want to wait for the client to be like, I want to be strong. I want to gain muscle. I want to build mass. You know what I mean? But like, those are the things you need to do when you want to be when you want to have that quote unquote toned look. All tone means is that you have a shape when you're lean. It's as simple as that.
Yep.
You might have some words that are more comfortable for you to get to that process. And as a coach, I'll navigate like that. But I also don't want to tread so lightly that we don't start focusing on the things we need to. We need to pivot the conversation, and we need to change the game up here and talk about how you want to be strong. You want to put on not only lean muscle, you want to put on, dare I even use the word, mass.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great point, and it's, it's funny you say we didn't want to ruffle feathers back then. I feel like I ruffled way more feathers 10 years ago than I am willing to do now. But I used to just straight up jump down someone's throat if they said they wanted to be toned. I would be like, hey, but do you even know what that means? Do you understand what you're asking for? Because they'd say, I don't want to build muscle. I just want to get toned. And like, my brain just couldn't let that slide, even though I knew what they meant. I had to educate them about what that meant. I've grown a lot since then. But, to be toned means to build muscle and to lose fat. You are not toning your fat into muscle, which is what a lot of women grow up to think, that they are just, firming up their body by kind of turning one tissue into another tissue. It doesn't work that way, guys. Your fat doesn't get harder. Your fat doesn't turn into anything. Your fat cells grow or they shrink. Your muscles grow or they shrink. There's nothing in between. So in order to become toned, you need to build muscle. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes just building enough muscle is enough to make you look, quote unquote, toned. Sometimes you need to build muscle and lose fat. Sometimes that can happen at the same time, although infrequently. Oftentimes, that's two phases. You need to build the muscle, and then you need to lose the fat, or vice versa. But that's what it means. So men seem to totally wrap their heads around this and understand it very, very well. Mostly.
Not all men.
That's true. But mostly men are happy with the idea of gaining muscle, getting bigger. A lot of men, can't be big enough. They could not be big enough. They would never be like, oh my gosh, I'm too big when it comes to muscle, right? Women, it's different. And, that's culturally, like we have that fear instilled in us from like the time we can talk, that we don't want to be too big. We don't want to take up too much space. Like we could talk about this all day, how effed up that is. But when it comes to creating the physique that you want, which I guess we should move on to that next part, is what physique do you want? Because that makes a big difference, right? A lot of people are going to have to put some goddamn weight on the bar and push it hard.
Right. And here's where I'm going to not be too biased in terms of what I think my female athletes want versus what they're asking for.
Mm-hmm.
You can have any kind of body you want.
Right.
The basics are still the basics. The foundation is still the foundation. Like Danny said, you need to build muscle, right? So I could sit here and classically be like, oh yeah, you probably want big delts and you want big glutes and you want nice hamstrings, but not too much of any of that, and you want that look. You know what I mean? But like not everybody wants that. Some people literally do want to be lean and on the smaller side, and that's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not sitting here trying to twist your arm and change what you want. What I am still saying, though, is even with that kind of look, you ain't going to get there if you don't focus on building, if you don't focus on strength, if you don't focus on muscle gain. And I don't want to be afraid to say those things, because without all those things, without committing to that stuff, and words do matter, that smaller, leaner look that you want, you ain't going to get there. You know what I mean? And then, of course, there are the stereotypes when it comes to bodybuilding, or the classics, I should say, like the bikini look or the figure look. And we very much so play to those. And sometimes we even steer people in that direction. They're like, I don't really know what I want. Or they like can't quite articulate or point their finger on it, but they just start saying things. We're like, I know what you're looking for. But there are outliers, and there are these instances in men too. Yes, there are stereotypes, but just like women, men want all kinds of different bodies. So our job is to not tell you what you want. Our job is to listen and steer you, or just straight up be like, okay, you got this idea in mind, but yes, you still need to, and I reiterate, get stronger, build, and put on muscle.
Yes, almost everybody. Like almost every single person, regardless of their goal, is going to need to build/gain muscle in some areas of their body, at least, right? Almost every single person. Now, you're right. There are the occasional outliers. I have worked with female bodybuilders, not bikini, not figure. Like they compete in the bodybuilding category. These are the biggest, muscliest women ever. And one of the ones I worked with had previously, not working with me, but had previously been on steroids for a long time. She was jacked. And her goal after she had come off of these drugs was literally to get smaller, head to toe. So like that's an example of somebody that doesn't fit what we're talking about here. But that's rare. It's very rare that we meet somebody who's like, oh, you see these delts I got here? I'm done. I am done with these delts. How do I get rid of them? Most of the time, people will describe the physique that they want, or sometimes send a picture of the kind of physique that they want. And from there, we can be like, okay, here's what you need to do. But it almost always involves building muscle somewhere, even if it is a pretty petite, slim physique. Usually they have glutes, they have hamstrings, they have abs. Those abs are muscle. You need to build it there, or you're not going to have it when you get lean enough. Of course, when people use other people's photos as goalposts, that always comes with its own host of issues, because your body is your body, their body is their body. It's going to look different. Don't know what to tell you, because we're all different. But it still gives us an idea of the direction that they want to go. So when we talk about men and women training differently, we're going to go with some stereotypes here. Most of the women that I talk to want, the huge ass. That's a relatively new development. That the same way I said some men, they like couldn't be big enough. Well, now I know some women who their butts cannot be big enough. They would never be like, oh my God, my butt is too big. How do I make it smaller? I haven't heard that in probably 5 years. Like, I need my butt to get smaller. No, I have not heard that. But pretty much every woman wants at least shapely glutes, like a roundish, highish, firmish glutes. They want some shape to their legs. They want to be able to wear a tank top and have some shape to their arms. Most women want to have a small waist, or at least the illusion of a small waist. So take that versus men oftentimes want huge arms, biceps, triceps, the bigger the better, big chest, wide back, small waist. Oftentimes legs are an afterthought for a lot of men, whereas women, the lower half is the first thing that they think of. It's the first thing that they train. Whereas men, it's the other way around.
I'm a challenger on that one. I feel like upper body muscle is like a feat of strength. And think about it. Like, name one woman that wouldn't want to do a pull-up, for example. And yes, you're right. When it comes to physique, hell yes. When it comes to strength, though, women also really enjoy having like a decent bench. Not all, but I think.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you.
Yeah?
I'm going to hold. Yeah, every woman wants to do a pull-up. Does everybody want to look like a woman that can do a pull-up?
Okay. All
That's
right.
a big difference.
Fair enough. Well, that's when you have to sell them on the fact that it will give you that hourglass shape because your lats are going to grow. And
we're getting there. We're getting there. But just so when I say like men and women should largely train the same, I mean in style, not necessarily in body parts. Because whatever physique you want, you should be emphasizing the body parts that you want to be emphasized in your physique. I don't know many men who come to me and they're like, I want to build the world's juiciest peach. Like,
wait a minute, Peach Boys. It was a thing. I mean,
was
it didn't
a
really
joke.
take off. No,
it was a joke.
Oh, I did not get that joke. I thought it was unironic.
No, I mean, those guys had really good butts from squatting and deadlifting and all of that, but they didn't do it like on purpose.
I did.
They weren't trying to build real juicy booties.
I wanted striated glutes when I got lean. I didn't get them this time around. Maybe one day.
Okay, you're the anomaly, okay?
Fair enough.
But, you know, with women, that's what they want. They say, I want a big juicy booty. They literally say those words. So that's what we focus on.
Okay.
Men say, I want to build my chest, or I want, 16-inch biceps. Women don't say, I really can't wait to have 13-inch biceps. That's not a thing that people say generally. So when building the programs, they're going to look quite different depending on the person. And I mean, you can have 5 women and all of their programs look different depending on what their goals are. But generally, those are some of the differences. But we should still be seeing, 3 to 4 sets of 8 to 12 reps of compound movements, training body parts once or twice a week, sometimes more depending on how much emphasis you want to place on that body part. And you should be bringing it in lifting to, an RPE 8, which is 2 reps in the tank for most of your sets in somewhere in, a hypertrophy rep range.
And I think that there are some differences when we're all starting out. Women are going to be responsive to the training stimulus in a different way in the beginning, but the deeper you get into it, the less differences there are, right? So the more serious you become at whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish in the gym, the less differences that you'll see between yourself and, say, a male lifter if you're a female listening, or vice versa for that matter.
What do you mean by that? I don't know what you mean.
Well, here's what I mean, right? So let's just say, for argument's sake, women have more endurance and they can theoretically crank out more reps without being as fatigued as men. Does that mean that women don't belong in powerlifting because they're not going to excel as much? No, because maybe in the beginning it might look a little different as far as like how you're training, but you want to train for the sport that you want to get better at. And you don't want to be discouraged as far as being in that sport goes. So what I'm trying to say is you invest the time and 5, 10, 15 years down the road, there are not as many differences as far as your work output and how you respond to it because you're training in a specific way for a specific response, regardless of whether you're a male or female lifter.
Mm-hmm. And the saying like dress for the job you want, not the job you have. The same thing kind of applies to training in some ways. It's like you want to train like the athlete you want to be. for the most part. You know, if you want to be a power lifter, you need to be touching those low rep ranges. You cannot be lifting 15 plus reps and thinking you're going to be a good power lifter, especially all the time. Not saying never do it, but same thing with a physique athlete. If you want to look like someone that has pumpkin delts, you're going to have to train like a person who has pumpkin delts. So, you know, if you're trying to create an X frame, training your abs 5 days a week doesn't make any sense.
Have you guys heard of the Vegan Cruise? If not, we want to tell you about it because we are so excited to be presenters on the 2023 cruise, and we would love to see you guys there. So the Vegan Cruise is exactly what it sounds like and so much more. It's a cruise from March 17th to March 24th that leaves from Miami and will be visiting Belize, Honduras, Costa Maya, and the Bahamas on the beautiful MSC Divinia. It is so cool to wake up in a new country every day of the trip, seriously. But as if that wasn't enough, one of the biggest drawbacks of most cruises is that there's nothing vegan to eat. I had a client actually go on a cruise recently, and she said she was shocked at how little she could eat, and for that price, it just was not worth it for her. But that's not a problem on this cruise because all 3 meals are fully catered, vegan, and made by gourmet chefs. You will never be hungry. There are also get-togethers like ice cream socials and pizza parties out by the pool. Very fun. And to top all of that off, the cruise is absolutely loaded with some of the biggest leaders in the vegan movement, giving lectures, presentations, and classes. Folks like Dr. Greger, Dr. Barnard, Dr. Clapper, Robert Cheek, Juliana Hever, and so many more, and of course, us. We will be hosting exercise classes and giving presentations on plant-based fitness. And of course, we would very much love to spend time with any of our listeners who come out. So if you're interested, click the link in the show notes to book your spot because it always sells out. And mention Vegan Proteins when you book and you'll get a $50 onboarding credit at the vegan bookstore. We look forward to vacationing with you guys.
So the number one, or I don't know, is it number one? I don't know. The number one difference that I think of when I think of biological women and men is women have hormonal cycles that men do not have. Their menstrual cycle. The fact that their hormones fluctuate over a roughly 4-week period can very well affect training. And I say can, I don't say does, because I've seen this a lot lately on social media, all of these hormone experts popping up out of nowhere. And it's like, no, you're not. You're not a hormone expert whatsoever. It's infuriating to me that these people tout themselves as hormone experts by knowing the most basic stuff about hormones ever. I digress. You know, there's phases for a woman where their estrogen peaks and then it drops. And then in the opposite phase, the progesterone drops and then it peaks, right? So this will, for some women, affect them a lot. So it's something to take into consideration. Many women will be strongest the week before they ovulate. And many women will feel weaker in the 1 to 2 weeks after they ovulate. Now, what is the difference here? I don't know. It depends on the person, really. And you need to know yourself here. If you know that the week of your period, this is super common. Like the week that you have your period, if you feel like crap every time you have your period, it makes a lot of sense to plan a deload for when you have your period. You know, this is not the time to go in and hit a PR if you always know you feel crappier during that week. So this is not something we have to do for men. This is not something we even have to consider for men. But with women, that's something that you can do. Now, some people, it's the days before their period, and then as soon as it hits, they feel like $1,000,000. So you have to know yourself and try to plan accordingly for that. But people who suggest like, oh, this week you should really be pushing it, and this week maybe you should just do yoga, and this week maybe you just stretch, like, I'm sorry, I don't buy it. I don't buy that at all. You're not going to make much progress that way by strength training hard 1 week a month.
How are you supposed to line that up with your life, first of all? Honestly, do you really need that level of control over your month to month? And is it that predictable? And if you try to schedule and structure and organize like that, are you going to be able to accomplish the goal that you have at hand, right? Whatever you got going on, your job, your family, your personal interest outside of training, I like to line up my clients around their lifestyle. If you line up a client around their cycle with managing fatigue and stress, you're going to set them up for failure because it's not perfectly predictable and it's not the only variable. Yeah, it should be considered as far as how you feel. However, in regards to how you manage fatigue and stress that is produced from training and diet, meaning like your fitness regimen, no, I don't agree with that. I think it's more complex than that when it comes to profiling yourself and thinking about what's optimal in terms of when you pull back on the intensity and when you push when it comes to training.
Yeah. And, like you just said, it's not that predictable. Like for some women, it's very predictable, but for most women, it's only kind of predictable. Like I have some clients that we schedule their deloads on their period, the week of their period. But like some days it comes a couple days early, some days it comes a couple days late. We're like constantly kind of shuffling it around a little bit. And then it's several months later and it's like that deload seems to pop up in their calendar on the totally wrong week and we have to fix it entirely. I mean, we can work with it, but it's not a perfect science. So you can't expect it to be. The other thing is for a lot of women, they're not going to need to do this at all. Their period is going to have almost no effect on them and they're going to be able to train just fine through it. There's other women who have hormonal problems, who have PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, or endometriosis, or they're in menopause or past menopause or approaching menopause. Like that's even less predictable, all of those things. Some women like myself who have PCOS and endometriosis are medicated in such a way we don't have a cycle at all. So I think to just say, oh, well, we need to train all women like this is a little bit insulting and kind of, again, I'm thinking back to all the things I've seen on like Instagram and like arrogant. It's arrogant to think that you could possibly spit out blanket information about other people's cycles and how to fix some of these problems like endometriosis by like getting sunlight without sunglasses on. Get out of here. Like, I don't want to hear it. I'm going to step down from my soapbox now. But watch out for those hormone experts on the internet. They are a stone's throw away from suggesting that you take TRT. So keep that in mind. It's coming. That's the next step. So steer clear. Those are my 2 cents. Other things you did touch upon, like women tend to do better with slightly higher reps. So where men might train more frequently in, say, a 5 to 8 rep range, women might do more sets in a 12 to 15 rep range and just do better because we handle metabolic stress better. We have lower arterial blood pressure, which allows more oxygen to get into the muscle, which means we can just work for a little bit longer. So, when I say higher reps, I don't mean 25, 30, 40, 50. I mean 15. Working up to 15 is probably fine. But again, the more you use it, the more you get better at it. So the more you lift heavier, the better you get at it, the more muscle you're going to build.
Right. So exploit your strengths in terms of your biology. However, don't let it dictate what you do on the whole, essentially,
right,
or what you want to train for, right, and who you want to become as an athlete. Hey listeners, we hope you've been enjoying this episode and we appreciate your love of all things vegan fitness. For those of you who want even more support on your vegan fitness journey, check out our Muscles by Brussels community and become a member. By joining the team, you are one of our exclusive VIPs. As a member, you'll find over 200 macro-friendly, high-protein recipes that can meet any of your meal planning needs. You'll also receive training programs that update monthly. This training has progressive overload built into it, so you can be sure if you're following the program, you are making progress. All of this and more is located inside our VeganProteins members-only app. As a Muscles by Brussels member, you'll unlock bonus courses, challenges, and more every month. You'll also be invited to our live Zoom video calls, which happen 2 times a month, and are absolute gold to those who show up. And if you can't make the calls, don't worry, you have the opportunity to email us whenever you want. You'll receive a video response to all of your questions from one of the coaches here at VeganProteins every time you message us. Members also receive 40% off many of our other services,
And of course, our private community of like-minded individuals is like no other. Best of all, you can try this membership out for a full month at no cost to you with this special offer for our listeners only, because we appreciate and want to fully support you. Use the link in our show notes to sign up for your free trial today. We hope to see you on our next live coaching call.
All right, so to sum that up, should women train the same as men? Largely, yes. Keep your goals in mind, keep your cycle in mind, but largely, put some weight on the bar, push it, and that's how you're going to get to where you're trying to go. All right, moving on to our question and answer segment. This one is for Giacomo. How long should one stay in a surplus or maintenance for muscle gain before going into a deficit for fat loss?
Well, first off, think about how long you want to be in a fat loss phase for. If you're in a fat loss phase for shorter than 8 weeks, you're not really getting anything out of it. Second thing to consider is how long have you taken a break from dieting? Dieting has a shelf life. Mentally and physically, your body and your mind can only tolerate so much of it. So you have to spend a certain period of time not dieting. And when it comes to dieting, or cutting if you will, you have to spend a certain period of time cutting in order to actually get results. And I think the minimum amount of time that you should consider before going to cut, in my opinion, is bare to bones, like at least 6 months. At least 6 months. And then on that second point, the minimum, and I mean bare to bones minimum time you should spend in a cut is like 8 weeks. I've seen less, but like 8 weeks or more recommended. So take that information, if you will, don't worry about mathing right now, and just think about the formula in terms of how long you should spend bulking to earn a week of cutting. And you need to spend at least 4 weeks worth of bulking to earn 1 week of cutting. So now if you want to do a simple equation, if you want to cut for 8 weeks, you need to spend 32 weeks bulking. Now, I don't want to sit here and create like a plan or an approach, but it all pretty much ties out. You want to be bulking for at least 6 months. You want to be cutting for at least 8 weeks. And theoretically, it should be much longer than that. And when you think about how long you've been bulking for, think of it in terms of for every 4 weeks you've been bulking, you earn about a week's worth of cutting. But the longer you spend bulking, the better your dieting down process will be and the better your results will be. And the more you'll have to show for it at the end, you'll have a better shape. This question's for you, Danny. Hey, I've been listening to your podcast lately and I love it. I do have a question and would love your advice. I have some fitness goals and would like to track my calories in order to figure out my maintenance calories and macros. The issue is I find it so hard to track and also have a social life. Like I go out to restaurants and bars, if you will. I can eliminate the alcohol, but I don't want to be a hermit and not do anything on the weekends with my friends. Do you have any advice on this?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for listening to the podcast. And my advice on this, first of all, it is very challenging to track your food accurately when you are eating out or at someone's house or something like that. It is challenging, but I would still recommend that you try. Especially if you're trying to find your maintenance calories, you don't want to just not count those days. What I would recommend when you're eating out is try to find an entry in MyFitnessPal or whatever you're using to track that is close to what you had and plug that in. It might not be perfect. In fact, it's not going to be perfect. You're not going to have this 100% accurate, but it is going to be close enough to give you an idea, and any tracking is going to be better than zero tracking, especially where you're just looking to find the calories in food right now, like you're trying to figure out your maintenance calories. Giving it your best guess and your best estimate by plugging in kind of what you think you had is probably going to get you in the ballpark of where you need to be. But if you just try not to track at all, then you're going to have no idea what your intake is. Because generally when we eat out, our intake is a lot higher than what it is at home. So if you just skip those days, your maintenance calorie estimate is going to be way inaccurate. So I know that it's hard to track when you're eating out, but just give it your best shot. Try and estimate what you had by, if you had pizza at a restaurant, if you had vegan pizza at a restaurant, go into MyFitnessPal, plug in medium vegan pizza, and, pick something that looks like it's probably in the ballpark of what you had. If you had a big, fat, thick crust pizza, you're going to pick one that has more calories in it. If you had little, thin cracker crust pizza that didn't have a lot of vegan cheese on it, you're going to pick one that has fewer calories in it. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be good enough to get you on the right path. All right, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Vegan Proteins Muscles by Brussels Radio. Please feel free to reach out to us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, at Vegan Proteins and at Muscles by Brussels, or go to veganproteins.com. Click the contact button. Check out some of our free resources there. We would love to hear from you. My name is Danny.
And I'm Giacomo.
And we will talk to you soon.
Stand in the